Welcome everyone to this workshop on cognitive accessibility. It's really nice to see that we have more than 240, I think, registered for this webinar from over 40 countries. That's when we stopped counting. So obviously this is again a very popular or a theme or a topic that many people are interested in. And we do have a packed agenda today. So we would like to urge you to use the Q&A function for any communication or questions for today's speakers. That makes it possible for me to read them at one place. And for any technical issues, then please use the chat function, and my colleague Eva will support you there. For any closed captions needs, please use the CC function available in Zoom. I also want to say that this webinar is recorded and will be uploaded to the study website afterwards. The topic of today is the study on inclusive web accessibility for persons with cognitive disabilities. This is a stakeholder workshop, and it's the second one that we carry out within this study. My name is Susanna Lorin. I'm the Chief Research and Innovation Officer at Funka, and I will be joined today by Sara Källstrand, my colleague at Funka, who is the principal lead and the brains behind this study, most of it, and also Christian Bühler, Dr. Professor Christian Bühler from the Dortmund University, who is part of our advisory board. So they will both be helping me with the agenda today. We have a packed agenda for 2 hours. We will have a short break in the middle, of course, but we are starting out with presenting the study and the topic, and this will be a little bit of a repetition for those of you who also were with us in the workshop during the spring, but we need to set the scene a little bit. And also very quickly a recap also on cognitive in the digital environment, just so that we know what we are talking about here. And then we go into the really interesting things, which is, of course, the findings so far. And we will also discuss, and here we would like as much as possible to engage with you, the proposals that we have and the solutions. So this is the focus of this workshop, is really the proposals for solutions that we are hoping to present in the study. And there will be discussions and possibilities for interactions also. And please, again, use the Q&A functions for any questions to the speakers. So, the European Study on Cognitive Accessibility. This is a study commissioned by the Directorate General for Communications Network, Content and Technology, and they are also responsible for developing the digital single market to generate smart, sustainable and inclusive growth in Europe. They are most maybe known, at least to us, for also being the unit working with the Web Accessibility Directive. And this is part of a framework contract held by the consultancy ICF, that in this particular study, Funka is carrying out all the tasks and being main responsible for this. We also have external advisors here. So Christian Bühler, who is joining us today from Dortmund University, and also Inclusion Europe, represented by Soufiane El Amran. And the kind of background here is really that there is a gap, or this is the thesis at least, that there's a gap in knowledge on cognitive accessibility. We often claim that this area is missing or very little explained, at least in requirements. So there are loads of kind of soft recommendations on cognition, but when it comes to normative standards, then cognitive is not really as present as it maybe should be. And also quite large groups are affected by cognition and cognitive accessibility, and maybe more and more so, as we have all seen during the pandemic, how difficult it can be to remember all your passwords and interact with all sorts of different digital interfaces in your everyday life. And I think this is something that really affects most of us, maybe all of us, at least very large groups. The objectives of the study is to gather evidence from research and different studies when it comes to digital accessibility. Also to identify gaps based on these on the studies we have seen. And this could be gaps both in research and in web accessibility requirements, for example, and then also to present proposals. So how could we as a society, or how could the Commission improve accessibility for persons with cognitive disabilities? And of course, all of this is done using different tools, for example, workshops, but we also do literature reviews. We do a number of stakeholder consultations, such as surveys and interviews and so on. So we are really trying our best to get a broad picture of this whole topic. So when it comes to web or digital interfaces, what is cognition really about? Well, we usually talk about the cognitive process here, which could be, I mean, this is could be a long presentation in itself, but really very shortly, or very briefly, it's about processing information. And when we do that online, we have many different sources that affect our cognitive abilities, such as texts, images, videos, audio, moving objects, loads of things that requires our attention in different ways. And not always is this something that we can shut down if we want to, or kind of sort, but it's just coming at us at a big phase. And of course, there is a risk of cognitive overload for all of us, and especially if you have challenges with understanding or kind of sorting things, then this becomes even more challenging. The barriers to accessibility, or the accessibility barriers as such, they do impact our mental functions, and we think this is a more constructive way of thinking about cognitive accessibility than maybe digging into the detailed diagnosis. And if you try to group the mental functions, this can be done in many ways, but what we usually say is that we group them into concentration, memory, language, emotional, social, and the word I still cannot pronounce, visospatial. So these are the mental functions that we usually try to divide the different parts of cognitive accessibility into, to make sure that we can describe them and then also find solutions for all these groups. And of course, it's not this simple, and it's not this clear in the groups. They also kind of interconnect in many different ways. Another important aspect on cognitive accessibility in the digital arena is, of course, that the situation matters, just as with any accessibility issue. First of all, the individual capacities varies among these different user groups, and it varies a lot. So you can be a little bit affected or very much affected depending on several things. And one thing that is very important to bear in mind is that the ability to carry out a task or understand content on the web is really based on my individual capacity, but also the environment. So this is quite a complex area to research, and also to provide solutions that are kind of broad and are beneficial for many users. Some of the barriers to inclusions that we have been looking into here can be also divided in different research areas, and these are the areas that we have identified within the literature review we have carried out in the study. And for example, there is inclusion and participation, the design considerations when it comes to ICT, so how the layout and presentation is done. Of course, the empowerment of the user being an agent and being able to do things on their own. The specific web accessibility requirements is, of course, very relevant, talking about the existing and upcoming legislation in Europe, but also everyday situations such as, when do users have the most need of these digital solutions, and in what circumstances or what situations are the barriers most frequent. Of course, technical solutions, these can be on many different levels, and we will get into that in a while, both assistive technology, but also more general solutions based in the browsers or in the interfaces themselves. And then specifically, of course, user involvement to understand and know these user groups. We need to, as always, but maybe even more important here, because these user groups can have difficulties with speech or understanding the testing environments and so on. But the user involvement are, of course, one of the most key issues here to make cognitive accessibility move forward. And that's also one specific research area that we have identified and looked further into. Another important aspect here is that many of the barriers to cognitive accessibility that we have identified or gathered here are common to persons with different needs and abilities. So not only for specific diagnoses or even for the target audiences usually claim to have a need for cognitive accessibility, but also for many other users. If you are stressed, or if you have problems focusing, or just have too much to do in your life, then many of these barriers are also affecting us, all of us. So when it comes to the barriers to inclusion, we see a lack of a common understanding of what cognitive accessibility barriers are, or what the user needs are for cognition. There is also a lack, again, of the normative standards, so loads of recommendations, but nothing really connected to the legislation so far, or I shouldn't say nothing, but too little and not very specific. So there are, of course, parts of the minimum requirements that do affect people with cognitive disabilities, but very little is specifically targeting these user needs. There's also a general lack of awareness among web professionals, and this could be developers, web designers, web authors, or website owners, for that sake, around these issues. And that may be very natural, because you tend to focus on what is what you know, and also what is then technically legally required is something that most of these professionals focus on. And when we do find solutions that exist already in the market, these are not widely known, or maybe they are not even available, or at least not easy to get to. So, and now we would like to engage you. So if I could, this was just the short introduction. And before we move on to presenting the findings, I would like to ask you, so if you just had one word, what kind of solution would you like to see for increased cognitive accessibility? And Eva, if you could please share the link to the Menti, we could create a really nice word cloud out of this. And you are allowed to use more than one word, but please not long sentences, because then the idea of the word cloud doesn't really work. So what kind of solution would you like to see for increased cognitive accessibility? If we could just get the audience to help us out here. Laws is the first one coming up. And if you are unable to use Mentimeter, then you can also, of course, just write in the chat. I know this is not perfectly accessible for all assistive technology users, but we can see how it evolves. Now, laws was the first one, but now guidelines is more is bigger than laws, so it's moving all the time. And guidelines are still the winner. So I think we see a clear view here, at least from the participants in this workshop, that we do have a need for guidelines, awareness, and knowledge, which are very, I would say, very interconnected or in the same area. So it seems to be correct, at least based on the audience here, that we do still need knowledge, guidelines, and awareness. So that, I think, leads into the need for further research, which is good, because that is something we can present to the Commission and hopefully fund more research. So that's really interesting. But thank you for all your ideas here and feedbacks. So we will present this afterward. I see empathy, I see training, personalized, understand fatigue, interesting, also simplification, of course. So many good ideas, and clean design. That's nice coming up also, and education, of course. So moving on, I would like to ask Sarah to present some of the, if I can go back to the presentation, yes, the proposed solutions, the first batch of solutions that we would like to share with you.
Thank you. So in the work cloud, we can see different tendencies, but how to conceive of the different proposed solutions is really a main issue that we are struggling with a bit for the final report. But in our thinking, we have divided it into two kinds of solutions that are on the next slide. So the first one is more general, which is accessibility measures that benefit all and tackle common needs. So this is sort of the basic floor, really the sort of an insurance for everyone, that interfaces should be easy to use and understand. And then on top of these general solutions, we also have a batch of more personalized solutions that are add-ons and extra support beyond these general measures. And these target individual needs. So first we will look at the set of general solutions and then move on to the personal. But it's important to understand already from the beginning that it is not an either-or situation, but that both types of solutions are really needed to complete the whole. So on the side of the general solutions, first we have web accessibility requirements, and then design-oriented guidelines, and awareness raising and training. And on the side of the more personalized solutions, we will then look at educational initiatives, technical solutions, and more personalized approaches. But starting with the general solutions, we first have the web accessibility requirements. And this is just go through the situation. So currently we have requirements, but they are usually not included in the normative standards. So what do we mean by that? The legislation in Europe and elsewhere point to standards where there are not as much requirements on cognitive accessibility that it could be. So most of the guidelines and requirements that are used for cognitive accessibility are outside these normative standards. And the other tendency is that there are guidelines and standards that are slightly contradictory in how cognitive accessibility and cognitive accessibility needs are defined. So in some standards, the needs are referred to in terms of specific diagnosis, and in others in terms of mental functions. And this means that the issue of cognitive accessibility is perhaps perceived as more complex than it is, because there are this sort of myriad of different ways of presenting the needs. And thirdly, there is a need for more measurable requirements. And this really is connected to the issue that requirements exist but are not included in the normative standards, because the normative standards build on requirements that can be easily evaluated, so they are measurable, whereas in more guidelines and non-normative standards, the guidelines can be a bit less precise, which also, but it has both pros and cons. It's definitely easier to evaluate and to spread requirements that are measurable. So what we propose in the area of web accessibility requirements is firstly that we should strengthen the legal requirements through normative standards. So the standards that the legislation points to should be strengthened in terms of cognitive accessibility. Secondly, we also believe that there is a need for to set up a common definition of user needs based on a broad categories of mental functions. So a common definition of user needs would be a way to also spread requirements and make it easier to compare different guidelines and to use them in more settings. And then finally, we think that related to these two proposals, there should also be an investigation on how to transform existing guidelines into measurable requirements. So there is a whole host of very useful guidelines, but since they are not easy to evaluate and easy to measure, there is a bit of a reluctance in some circles. That's what we've heard from the stakeholder consultation. It's difficult for web professionals to use guidelines that are not measurable. And instead of inventing new requirements, one way to reinforce and strengthen legal requirements would be to simply see how existing guidelines can become more measurable. So moving on to the next type of more general solutions, we will talk about design process and guidelines. And first of all, what do we mean really when we talk about design guidelines? Well, it's about presentation and layout, but it's also about going beyond the specific issues that web requirements look at. So a web accessibility requirement will, for example, look at a certain element. If a clickable element is really marked as clickable, whereas design guidelines look at the whole. How are elements related to each other? Is there too much information in a certain interface or too little? And it also is a way to take into account the whole user experience. So is the interface easy to learn how to use? Is it also pleasant and something that you are motivated to go back to? So this is why design process and guidelines are equally important. And one key aspect of this is really to make use of user participation. And that is central to building in accessibility and usability from the start. What we heard a lot now in both the surveys and the interviews we have been doing is that in the instances where user participation is considered in different research and development projects, it often comes in very late in the process. So there is already a product or service that has been developed and will then be tested with users. And the users often find that there are quite big flaws that could have been prevented earlier on in the process. So really to have user participation, but also early on in the process is something that comes up quite often in the study so far. And then thirdly, somebody actually posted in the chat here about personas, and that is one thing that we have also noticed in the study, that nuanced personas and modeling can also help to increase understanding of needs. And what a persona is a fictional history or characteristic of a user in a specific situation. What are their needs and what are they looking for in the interface? And when we talk about nuanced personas, we are talking about fictionalized persons that are a whole person and not just defined by perhaps a diagnosis or a specific situation, but really it's also important to show that persons with and without cognitive impairments can face the same issues and have the same needs in different situations. This is why the nuancing in both personas and modeling is very important. So looking forward to the proposals. Firstly, there is a need to provide incentives and guidelines for user participation in the design process so that it actually happens. There are many barriers to user participation. A lot of feedback that we have received is that it's seen as a complex and difficult process. It doesn't have to be, there can be different steps, but there is really a need for perhaps awareness training and incentives to make use of user participation in good conditions, on the terms and conditions of the users themselves in the design process. Secondly, there is a need for an increased awareness and use of principles of user-centered design. And one of the principles is, of course, to have user participation, and more broadly, increased awareness of universal design principles. Because this is really the basis, the start of making products and services usable for all, and to build in both accessibility and the flexibility into products and services. And then, of course, the third proposal that we have here is to ensure that existing design guidelines are more widely spread, because there are a lot of guidelines. And what we have seen in the interviews and also in the survey is that some people are not aware of any guidelines at all, and others say, well, we don't need to do anything about accessibility because we have everything already. So there is this contradiction. There are a certain amount of guidelines, there could be more, but there is also a need to spread them to a wider circle. So the last thing that we are also proposing in this context is to create more personas, and also to make them nuanced so that they are based on cognitive needs and specific situations and needs that are common to different user groups, rather than actually labeling persons, because personas that are labeling are not usually very helpful. So moving on to awareness raising, and this could be a topic for a complete study of its own. But just as a start, cognitive accessibility is for everyone. And this is a message that has come through in some circles, but not everywhere. So that's the first basis for awareness raising. And then secondly, connected to this is to raise awareness of user needs that are common across the groups of users. And then finally, to increase research into and awareness of the overall benefits of cognitively accessible websites. So this has to do with the business case for accessibility and for cognitive accessibility. So there is even though there is widespread knowledge and the idea that, of course, cognitive accessibility is useful for everyone, there are surprisingly few studies that actually provide concrete evidence on this point. So the proposals in this area is to work for increased awareness raising to reduce stigmatization around cognitive user needs. It's also to increase knowledge and awareness of cognitive accessibility for, in particular, the persons that are developing, designing, and take responsibility for websites and apps. And of course, related to awareness raising, it's not only about raising awareness and of knowledge about the issues, but also that there are, in fact, good practices that should become more widely spread. So just to recap a bit on what we are talking about in the general requirements or general proposals. So first we have the web accessibility requirements, where there is a need for a common definition around user needs to increase the focus on cognitive accessibility in European standards and to have more requirements that are measurable. And then we have the design process, where there is a need for incentives for further user participation, to make use of the existing guidelines, and also to provide more nuanced personas. And then on awareness raising, there is a need to reduce the stigmatization around cognitive accessibility and cognitive accessibility needs, to increase knowledge, especially for web professionals and persons working with digital interfaces, and to spread good practices. So what we would be interested to hear now is that, have we forgotten something crucial? What are your comments on these proposals? So please write in the Q&A if you have any comments on these, and if there's anything that we have forgotten or anything that should be added.
So we have a comment in the chat about your European standards or upgrading WCAG. So what we mean with European standards here is our perspective. As this is a European study, we are focusing on Europe and the European legislation. So when we say European standards, we mean the minimum requirements, which needs to be EN standards, and of course those must be harmonized with global standards. So in the best possible situation, we would have global standards for everything, but as you may know, the European legislation needs to point to European standards. So that's why we have expressed it that way. But really, it's normative standards for Europe. That's the idea here. Tools to experience cognitive inaccessibility to increase understanding. Yeah, so that's one thing that could be added maybe in the chat. So a way of awareness raising and understanding could be like simulations or things like that. That's interesting. We actually we're just finalizing a project on that where we're using virtual reality or 360 videos to share knowledge from or experiences from the user perspective. So definitely that's a good part of the knowledge and awareness raising, of course. Yeah, so we don't have that many examples from the audience, so I don't know if that means that we have covered them all, or if it's just cognitively hard to take in everything. And of course this will be much more detailed presented in the report, so room for more in-depth coverage of these topics and so on. I don't know if you want to comment something, Christian.
There was just one comment in the chat. Was something on fatigue, and it is, in my opinion, it's very difficult to deal with fatigue in a general, on a general level. This very much relates to the individual and the personal measures you can take. But anyhow, I mean, maybe if somebody has some ideas on how to handle fatigue in a web interface, it would be very interesting.
Yeah. And we also have Pixel Inga saying that user empowerment to take a more active part in the process. I think that is really what we are trying to focus on when we talk about user participation, so that not only being kind of waiting until the product is almost finished and then do testing, but really to participate and be included from early on in the processes. So that is part of that concept or that idea proposal that we are going to propose. We have the design trends, maybe as new design trends comes in every 2 years and design trends are followed by mass number of designers, should be a topic to explore. Yeah, design trends. So design processes and design trends, it's hard to make, I'm not really sure how to transform that into a proposal, but I think it's a really important comment, I think, because also we see, especially when we compare interfaces throughout Europe or also internationally, that a good website in Sweden is not the same thing as a good website in Spain, and so on. So, and that is, of course, history, tradition, what you're used to, and that I think is the same with design. So when the design trends kind of change things all over, then some users will struggle because everything looks different. And I think many of us struggle when the design, just the updates of software that we use is updated and redesigned. So, but it's a very good comment there. And then we have a question for what this is about. So it is about a study. The report of the study is not yet finalized. So this workshop is to gather information for the study. So the final study will be public, of course, and published in the first quarter of next year. So I think we can move on to a short break to make sure that everyone gets a cup of coffee, or if you want to move around or do something else. So let's aim for a 15 minutes break and meet again here at 5 to 2 Central European time. So 15 minutes break, and you can come back fresh with new ideas and new questions. And don't hesitate to ask questions. We will take all the questions in the Q&A later on. So thank you. So welcome back, everyone. I hope you have had the chance to get something to eat or drink, or at least do something else, shake your head for a while, because now we'll move into the next set of proposals, and this part of the agenda will be presented by Christian Bühler. So if you are ready to go, Christian, then I'll make this move.
Let's go for it.
On the personal solutions.
So first of all, I'm very much impressed that so many people are within this seminar or workshop, and it shows the very importance of this project, and also the content and the interest. Second thing I have to mention is I have not worked in the study, but I just accompany from the advisory board. I'm very glad to present some of the aspects which have been carried out in the study. And you know, if we go to personal solutions, I come back to what has been said in the beginning. There are these different levels. They're like a macro level, medium and micro level, or societal levels, group levels, and individual level solutions which we're looking for. We're looking in this part very much on the personal and the individual level. So all levels are important, and not to say one is more important than the other, because I think they have to complement each other. From another perspective, you can also talk about the system and the provider level, or who is doing the design, and you know, the individual taking the service or whatever it is. And these two perspectives are, you know, to be brought together, and this is really a big challenge. So we go first into a very important issue, that is training education. So training education settings are so important for all of us in all, you know, levels of life, starting with the children, of course, but you know, later in life, it's also very important to have educational settings and training settings for all of us, you know, to challenge with this fast changing environment we are living in. So it's very important that the assurance of availability of accessible technology in these educational settings is given. That's the first issue. Second issue is that it must be, you know, compatible to what the people really need and what they want. I mean, the users have a goal in educational settings, and it must be meaningful for them. And the training and education has to be adapted to actually their goals. So that's a very important issue. And you know, already simple things like it's not very much web, but I mean, starting with textbooks which we presented are often not available in easy to read or in formats people can use it for children, for example. So what are the proposals from the study to tackle with it? We're starting with, let me go further here. make sure that the learning environment is adapted. The environment must be adapted. And one of the issues here is something what we call the universal design for learning. And there are some guidelines existing on that, which have, let me see, 3 issues looking at the why of learning and the what of learning and also the how you learn. And then they propose a number of checkpoints what you should do. This is, let me say, a very interesting concept for a starting. But of course, when it comes to cognitive problems, you have to have a special look at it. I mean, it's a universal approach, but I think universal design for learning and cognitive is a very specific issue, but still it's an interesting approach. Further things are the didactics you're going to use, which might not be universal. And also very important is the timing. If it comes to cognitive problems, we have further fatigue earlier this afternoon. But there are also other timing problems. People need time to, learn in their own pace and not to be overloaded in very, very fast sessions. And that's for children, but also it's for all of us. I mean, timing is a very important issue. And let me just come back to user participation. Also, timing is a very important issue here. It takes time, and you have to take the time. Otherwise, you might be efficient, but not effective in the end, and you have no real outcome. And the second issue is the platforms. What kind of platforms can you use for learning and practicing key digital skills? I mean, that's something which is not born. You have to get to it somehow, and this is something which is important. And there are a number of platforms which testing things like for older people and for people with dementia and so on. But this is something which we have to work on further. And then the guidelines and support document need really simple, easy to read and understand. And coming to cognitive issues, let me use this word of cognitive overload. Once you have your storage capacity and your processing capacity is already taken by how to handle the system, you will not be able to work with the content. And that's a very important issue. So simplicity is indeed one, as well as how we phrase things and as I have presented, very important that the workspace you have in your mind is free for dealing with the content rather than just with the surroundings. And that's, you might remember children starting learning, they can read the letters, but they don't understand the words. This is a similar kind of, as long as you have to look at the letters, you won't understand what you do, what you say. And that's one of the principles here. So documents and features must be easy to read and easy to understand. Okay, then we move on to the next, this on technology. We know that there are several assistive technology solutions for cognitive support already on the market, but not well known among the broad public. That's one issue. The second issue is that sometimes stigmatization is involved. That means that people won't use, even if it's existing and they might know about it, they feel the stigma of the cognitive assistive technology. And then we have to differ between the different varying degrees. In the beginning, there was one of the questions about the heterogeneity or diversity of this particular group, because it's a huge group and there are very diverse needs out there, and we have to to care for all these varying degrees of cognitive impairment. So what are the proposals on that side? First of all, the existing solutions. We have to raise awareness about it. So some solutions are there which already can be used. In this context, it would be helpful to get an overview of these existing solutions, like repositories or websites or so on. And there are several projects on the way, but one I know and Funke is involved in, that is the Buddy project, which is starting to come up with a repository of existing solutions and also systematic of it, which might help us to to find the right solution for the personal, on the personal level. Let me say that it's very important that we're talking here, between these two level, micro and medium level, and not about the macro level actually. So it's about personal solutions here, depending, of course, with the other things. And then the issue of reducing stigmatization. I mean, to have a help function running is nothing bad. If the issue is that you have to perform and you want to perform, you come to a certain a certain result, and whatever technology support you can use is helpful and should not be a stigma. So we have to work on that to reduce stigmatization. And I mean, finally, it has been mentioned, even if talking about personal solutions, we can always consider, is there a capacity for universal design here? And as it was mentioned earlier, if you have time pressure, too much to do, a lot of stress and so on, if you have not enough sleep, we all face these challenges of sometimes being not at the top of our minds. And insofar, universal capacity of solutions is actually there and can be considered even looking from the personal level. Then we're talking about something which is, not technology only, but with different things. This personalization of interfaces and work settings, add-ons, solutions adding on to accessible interfaces, not replacing it. I mean, just give amendments, giving other options, more explanations, or whatever it might be, different designs, different presentations, not too much on one page. There are a lot of issues which can be solved, not replacing. So we're not asking for having a special website or so for a person, but on the website to support with add-ons accessible interfaces. And sometimes, to be honest, we can do whatever we want. We still need some more personal assistance. When you work in this field, you know that that personal assistance in cognitive, for cognitive people with cognitive problems is one of the very important issues here. And we can not say we will solve everything with technical solutions. So personal assistance is needed. And then the solutions here, proposals to that, is that we have to look into the possibilities for personalizations in browsers, like add-ons, for example, plugins or whatever it is. We have this already for many purposes not connected to cognitive, but there might be more, and we have to investigate the option of providing more for the cognitive area. Then the digital support in educational settings and at work. So what can you do with task completion, for example, learning at work? There's a lot of a number of apps available for supporting people in step-by-step explanations of what they want to do and they can do and so on. And then this is in educational settings as well, like timing and at work for task completion. And I come back to these personal assistance. We have to really investigate where it is needed and in which circumstances people really can benefit from it, or whether it creates barriers. But looking at the development in business, how we deal with banking or buying, we have to come up with something which really can support people to do that. And at least in my country, we have a problem with, the carers sometimes have are not allowed to work with the banking information of a person. But how can they do then online banking? And these are questions which need to be tackled, to be solved. And maybe a first step will be the European Accessibility Act and some of the coming up there as standards, or little small standards. But I fear that for the cognitive area, it's not that much available here. Okay, but what I'm saying is personal assistance for digital work is something which need to be considered similarly as to other everyday tasks, as we do it already in many cases. So that are solutions, way to solutions, and I'm sure you have a lot of ideas, comments on that. And before you go to that, we summarize in training education, the universal design for learning was mentioned. The necessity of training platforms, giving people the chance also to develop skills in digital means. Understandable manuals, so understandability of manuals, but also of help functions and so on is very important. And we all know about it. You fill a form, and in the end, you get something back. Something was wrong, but you don't understand what, so why. So these are typical settings. The technology spreading solutions which already exist, or given an overview, reduce the stigma on that, and consider the universal design capacity of the solutions, the technological solutions. And then in the personalization specifically, look at what we can do with add-ons and plugins to browsers, platforms, and so on, and giving personalized digital support in e-banking, e-commerce, and so on, in the everyday tasks of people, and generally personal assistance in all the settings which we mentioned already. So you see, it's a mixture of technological, of awareness, of knowledge, and also of non-technological measures which have been coming up from the study. And now we're looking forward for your comments and your ideas. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Christian, for giving this overview. So I will, we already have one comment in the chat saying that learning environments should be both inclusively designed and adapted to diverse personal needs. And I think that is really kind of leading to the same conclusion as we have here with the training platforms needing to be accessible, but also there will still be groups of users who need more specific support, personalized support than could be provided in the platform. I mean, and we are looking at how the technology looks today, so maybe all of this will be solved with a fancy AI or something in the future, but how it looks right now, we also do think that there's a combination of kind of the general solutions, and of course the accessibility of the platforms or e-learning systems themselves could be a lot improved, but we also think that there need to be a way for the individual approach there. So any other ideas here? Did we forget something on the personalized level? Does anyone have an idea that you think that we should absolutely take into to our discussions and the final refinements of the study report and the results? And we are really eager to hear your suggestions and ideas on more proposals or more potential areas for solutions. And it doesn't have to be in the general or personalized, it could be just generic also. So any comment here is valuable to us. So parents' involvement is one suggestion in the chat. So Yeah, I'm not really sure how, but of course, if we are talking about children in school and the training environment for children, then of course parents need to be involved, and also I think the dialogue between the school and the different learning items or systems or apps or whatever, and making sure that the knowledge and experience from the parents are also taken into account, so that not only kind of experts are deciding what's best for the children, but that the parents are involved is extremely important, and also for the parents to learn maybe about the learning environment. So definitely, I think there is always a group of professionals and family and friends and teachers and colleagues or whatever that are really important for all of these support measures. So we look at kind of the person in need for accessibility, but then there is a lot of other people, caregivers maybe around this person. So
So just coming back to one of the comments which we came earlier, I mean, very clearly, the first part of the solutions were on the general level, and that's what we will have to start with. I mean, we want to have better web interfaces, we want to have support, technological support, and so on the general level. And but we have to amend it sometimes, you know, from the other side, like ending up with parents maybe, but also with personal assistants or personal digital assistants. But these are two sides which have to work together. And we should not, of course, say we do everything with personal assistants and we have to do nothing on the other side. I mean, if that was one of the messages which came across, that it was completely not my intention. Absolutely.
So thank you, Christian. So we have a comment here on that one size doesn't fit all. Personalized support could mean a link to alternative solution platform, like the democratization of design. So that's a nice expression. And I think that is exactly what we're referring to here, that we need on both levels. So that is, again, I think one of the problems that we have seen in this study and also in other research projects is that even though there are solutions out there and also possibilities for personalizations, then still many users don't know how to deal with that, or they don't know the options, or they don't know how to select the right preferences for them and so on. So I think there are many good solutions and ideas and technology and setups out there, but you need to kind of connect the user with this solution in a good way. So that's what we are also discussing a lot in the study team, what kind of proposals we can provide there to make sure that gap is bridged. But absolutely, we are not trying to fix everything in one go here. And then we have a comment on, so I'm reading as I'm speaking here, but when I think about the living environment of many people with intellectual disabilities, I can also imagine that if they live in institutions or work in institutions, the facilities may not be provided. Maybe it's also a problem of awareness, but it might go a bit deeper. I think this is an important issue as well. We have seen that, especially during the pandemic, this has been highlighted, that in some care homes and institutions, also for elderly, internet was not provided. So they had to stay at home or stay in their care institutions and so on. And everyone said that it would be, possible to use the digital solutions, but they were not provided even with the kind of the basic infrastructure for that. So and that I think there's a long list of potential problems and maybe bias or preconceptions and resources and so on. So, but definitely there's something important there. So
maybe I can add to that. It's of course not only about the resources on the technical side. It's also on the resources on the people working in these institutions, and it is also kind of a gatekeeper problem, particularly in as far as, at least from the perspective from my country. I mean, I'm pretty sure other countries have different issues here, but we have a problem that the institutions from the top down to the workers in the institutions sometimes are very, let me say, preventive, and securing people maybe too much. So they, even if they have internet and so on, they just say they can't do it and they will do something wrong, and this kind of thing. It's a problem of acceptance, also from the personal. I think that at least in our country we have a problem with that.
And just to add, for anyone who doesn't, we have participants from all over the world, Taiwan, Mexico, and so on in this workshop. So I just want to say that Dortmund is in Germany. So
Okay.
Christian says my country, that he doesn't own Germany, by the way, but he lives in Germany. So yeah, and then we have another interesting comment in the chat. So thank you for providing all those ideas. I think it's really really helpful and beneficial to us. So please keep writing. But we have one comment here saying, speaking of school, a way to get the history of help someone has gotten previously, especially when going from high school to university. So, and this is written from my country, which is Sweden. And I think there are similar problems in other places, but I know especially we do know for sure from research we have done in the Nordic countries that the systems for providing support of different kinds, and this could be personal or assistive technology or sorts of support measures, are so divided in different parts of society, what you do at school, what you do at work, and the different levels of schooling and so on, so that it's really, you need to go through the whole process of applying again because it's taken away from you because you are turning 18 or whatever. So that is also a very important aspect of this, to have the support measures kind of following the individual throughout life, and it doesn't matter if it's study or work or leisure. I mean, it should be, you have the same needs probably, or similar needs, no matter if you have a birthday in between or not. So that's also a very good perspective on this, which kind of covers both general at the system level, this needs to be done, but of course the effect of it boils down to the personal level. So and we have another one here. People-centered design covers both inclusive design and universal design capacity. Technology should cover all the designs. So, Christian, do you want to comment on people-centered design? We can start the terminology discussion here and can go on until tomorrow. But
yeah, I mean, the question is how far you can get with it. I mean, let me say that way. I'm very much in favor of doing as much of the solution from this side. But on the other hand, my experience was I will always find someone who will not be able to use it. And that's where comes the personalization very much in from my point of view. We should not leave these people out. So we do as much as we can with people-centered design, inclusive design, universal design. But in the end, we have to find solutions for everyone. And at least my experience is that always somebody comes and says, I will not be able to use it. And that's why I was talking about the personal perspective, individualization, and this kind of things, and also the personalization in terms of assistance at the end.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting, a little bit depressing, but still interesting that it's 2021 and we still need to kind of talk about that we are different. So I think that's part of being human, and that we need technology or every piece of life we are perceiving information and doing things in different ways. That's because we are human, and that's part of that is part of what humanity is that we are different and we have different needs and abilities, and it's just fascinating that is kind of still news to some organizations, but I think that is exactly where this is at. So if providing general or society level solutions can help many, but it can never help, or at least very rarely help everyone. So or it can support maybe everyone, but it doesn't give you all the support that everyone needs. So the combination of general and individual kind of society and personalized, I think is really the key here to make sure that we get everyone on board. We also have a very relevant comment here that I think awareness and stigmatization go hand in hand, and I have seen it firsthand. So yeah, I think that is it's true. And after working with accessibility in so many years, I still say that I haven't met anyone yet who creates or designs or develops inaccessible interfaces because they are evil or because they don't want people to understand it. It has to do with awareness. But then if you don't have the experience, and maybe if you don't meet many people with different abilities, then maybe you can also have kind of a negative approach to this. But really, I think it's really mainly a lack of awareness and lack of knowledge on how to solve things, even if you are aware of it. So definitely. And another idea comes in here. You can always keep plan of given program in person's file, like everything you have done, goals, progress, individualization, etc. You can always keep plan of given programs in person files. So I don't know if this is more a way of me saving my personal preferences. There has been quite some research done previously on this, where the most, I think, high-tech part was really having something under your skin that told the ATM or whatever digital interface that I kind of approached to that I have a low vision, for example. So that, I think there's a lot of research going on into that kind of personalization, but all of this also opens a lot of complicated doors to privacy and all of these things. Maybe you don't want to reveal your disability, or you don't want to be identified, and so on. So, but everything about this with preferences is really, it's always a fine balance, I think.
But I mean, it's a very important issue, and privacy and data security is one thing, but the other, as far as I understand the comments in line to the two comments on school to university and so on, is relating to transitions. And we know that transitions is a very, very big break point, and everything can go wrong with transitions from one class to another, from primary to high school, from high to university, from university to work. All these, transitions are really vulnerable steps where a lot of things can go wrong. And so I understand this comment saying we need to, bridge in the transition and take care that the transition goes smoothly, and things has been achieved in the former step will be taken up in the next and not, be lost. That's what I understand from these comments, and that's a very good idea.
Yeah, I agree. And we also have a comment on, I like the personalization approach, as it goes in line with building modular technology where people with different needs can set up or plug in what fits better for them. So that would be, I think, extremely important and good, but I still see the challenge for people to understand how to activate this, or how to make sure that I get the setup or the plugins or the preferences that I need. That has been proven to be more difficult than is maybe expected when you start doing this. But definitely, I would like personally to see all websites to be kind of very, very simple and showing just a very small content, and then for users to add things on, instead of, we always provide as much as possible, and then people may be able to simplify, but it should really be the other way around, I think. But that's just a personal touch on this, because all our clients want to have everything in the website or everything on the starting page. So thank you for all these good ideas. I don't know, Sarah, if you want to comment or anything on any of this, or if we should move on to your...
Maybe I make one comment on what has been said before on the measurability of the standard. I mean, that's a very important issue, but to be honest, in the cognitive area, the measurable or measurability of things is the most problematic thing we have, because it's dependent on so many points actually. And we have, for example, for language complexity, you have a number of indices which can calculate something, which can measure something, but it's depending on the culture, it's depending on the language, it's depending on the setting. It's not, if you have it's a kind of an indicator you get, but it doesn't say in the end it's easy enough. So measurable, I think a lot of more research need to be done in into this. How can you really measure let me say the cognitive appropriateness of a certain website or content, or also operation, navigation, and so on. That is really something which I think we need more research.
I think the answer to all of this is that we need more research, because that is really the kind of the overall new research, or new ways of adapting things, or new ways of spreading knowledge and so on. But definitely that will be one of the main results, I think, is that more research is needed. More research is needed. Although I think both Sarah and I would question or challenge your view on measurability, but let's keep that offline so far. So Sarah,
I was about to say on measurability that I think we are talking about two different things, and this is a typical scientific kind of discussion where you get into an argument about definitions, but there are two different ways of seeing measurability here. But research is needed. Is really a good answer to everything, and it's exactly what we are moving into now in the next part of the presentation. And just to summarize, or rather again state what we have been saying from the beginning, is that these general and the individual solutions are not in contradiction with each other. On the contrary, they are needed to go together so that solutions for individuals complement and broader accessibility for all. That should be the basis. And then we get into the more research needs that we have come up in this, that has come up so far in the study. These are just a few. We are speaking to a lot of stakeholders, both in interviews and in the surveys. And if you talk to one researcher, you will have 20 different research needs. So we will have to sort them in some way, but just a few recurring issues. So first we have the basic evidence to back up the statement that everybody keeps telling us, and that comes back all the time when we talk to stakeholders, is that benefits, cognitive accessibility benefits everyone. And we can see that in the survey that we did as well, where a lot of people that responded to the survey did not themselves declare themselves to have a cognitive impairment, but had the exact same issues and barriers as persons defining themselves as having a cognitive impairment. And one of the interviewees that I talked to put it really nicely. She's an expert in web accessibility in Southern Europe, and they do user tests for different clients with different user groups. And what she said was that persons with cognitive impairments are the first to see issues that persons without cognitive impairments will also notice. So it's a bit like the canary in the mind, really the first sign of distress. This is what you should be looking at. And that is then confirmed by other groups. But when we look at the studies, if you go into databases of research studies, we can only find a handful, just in fact, only one or two that look at cognitive accessibility with user groups that do not have a specific diagnosis or that do not consider themselves to have cognitive impairments. Often research seems to be very focused on this kind of groups or that kind of group or this setting or old or young or education only. And what is needed to confirm the anecdotal evidence and also the survey is really more research to back up the sort of knowledge that we have around cognitive accessibility as being beneficial for everyone. And secondly, we also have, we can also see in the research that for some reason, there is a lot of research on education and schools and children, and then there's a gap, and we don't know what happens to individuals throughout the life cycle, but somewhere when they are seniors, they become interesting for researchers again. So there's a lot of research on senior citizens, and that has a lot to do of independence and, frankly, in a lot of studies, to cutting costs. So there is an imperative to sort of train senior citizens to become more independent. And there is an interest in looking at school children also to become more independent. But what happens in between? There are really few studies. In employment, in everyday life, it's exactly connects to the issue that we were discussing recently, that a person has a right to assistance within the setting and with that age group. And then what happens when you transit from one age to another? And this is not, shouldn't be ad hoc. I mean, everybody gets older and in a certain linear way. We should know this by now. So more research is needed into what happens when you're not young and not old. And the third area to look at that is also connected to this is cross-disciplinary research. What we can see now that we're talking to researchers and looking in the literature is that there are sort of independent bubbles looking at research from a specific user group or a specific situation. And when we do, like we are doing now, literature review looking at commonalities between the different research, we can see that there are a lot of common needs that are being looked at from different angles. But these connections are not really done. And that's been really interesting in the interviews we are doing, that we can say, but okay, so you're doing research in this area. Did you know that there is also quite a lot of research connected to it in another area? And often people don't. So if we are going to have a good basis for this general level of accessibility, there is a need for cross-disciplinary research to really pick up on what can be used from the insights in one area and transferred into another area. So those are the needs that are coming from the research and the research study. And then there is also a series of sort of, oh yeah, there's one more area I forgot. This is also connected to the cross-disciplinary research, really, and the connections of accessibility research to user-centered design and UX. So there seems to be groups, and this could be the eternal discussion of definitions when you talk to different research groups. It's how do you define your research area? Often the incentive to do research comes from, and the funding is connected to a specific group. So user-centered design and UX have many touching points with cognitive accessibility, but there seems to be the dots are sort of linking it are sort of missing in the research. So then we come to the hot and upcoming issues, and this is both from the stakeholder consultations that we've been doing and also from the research studies, but we have also sort of woven in observations that we are doing of the discussion that is ongoing generally in the accessibility field. So one of the things that is very popular now, and a lot of funding is given to augmented reality and virtual reality solutions. And then, of course, we have Facebook that has now changed name into Meta, and it's going to be the metaverse, where everybody will be a nice avatar and live life in the VR goggles. But what is really needed here is also to look at how cognitive inclusion is taken into account in this new extended reality in different solutions. There is research also funding from the European Commission that looks into inclusion in these kind of solutions. But this is really something that since research, or at least solutions, technical solutions, is exploding in the area, we also need to make sure that accessibility and cognitive accessibility keeps up with the new developments. And then we have, related to a different debate that we had in the earlier workshop, when we talked in the workshop about barriers earlier this year, there was a huge discussion around passwords and logins and how difficult it is to understand and remember passwords. And a related issue to this is all the security, and but also the ethics and consent, because with the GDPR and all legislation around privacy and security issues, users are being swamped with messages on consent. And I'm not sure, but I'm not reading a lot of them, and I'm not sure that users are actually have the capacity, the patience, and the ability to read, take in, and understand all the long privacy statements and consent, from cookies to more complicated text, loads of text, quite complicated, complex. And this is also an area where cognitive accessibility needs to be looked at a bit more. And then we have, related to what we just discussed about training, you learn something and then you need to relearn it because there's been an update in the software. And this is stressful for everyone, but especially when you talk about persons with cognitive impairments, the trust issue is super important, to be able to both have the confidence in yourself that you are able to use the software, and also to be able to trust the owner of the website and or the app, that you understand exactly what has happened when there is an update and changes. And this is also connected, the issues of trust is also connected to the digitalization push in public services. This may be different in different countries, but certainly in Scandinavia, in Sweden and the Baltic countries, it's becoming more or less impossible to live without the, to do services, to exist as a public person without your mobile and digital identification. So with the digitalization push in public services, it's really important to make sure that people are not left behind. So these are the most upcoming issues that we have thought of. But now the question is if you have anything to add on the research front. So now it's time for another word cloud and a poll. And this time we would be asking in one word, in what area do we need more research about cognitive accessibility?
If we can ask Eva to put the link, yes, it's already there. So if you just follow the link in the chat, then you will go to the word cloud. More design research, it's number one. Gaming coming in, that's also another interesting area that we have been looking into in several projects, and it kind of comes back popping in, and I think there are many connections there also to cognition. Easy to read automatic translation. That's interesting. That's actually something that I think the European Commission is looking into as well. There are research projects going on, and we have also touched a little bit about, on AI-based translation, but not easy to read, but more plain language. But that's definitely an area that would support many users. Of course, combined disabilities comes up here. That is also a very important issue here, the multiple diagnoses and multiple disabilities, of course. To have simple interfaces, yeah. Psychology, so many interesting things here. It's interestingly, the yellow is a little bit difficult to read, but built-in tools, I think this is what we are all hoping for, a little bit more automation and a little bit more built-in kind of mainstreaming of support would be beneficial to many users, and as much as possible, you don't need to kind of apply for a separate assistive technology and so on. So the mainstreaming aspect is extremely important, of course. But it looks like design, universal design, and combined disabilities are now the top here, with gaming coming up close. And personalization as well. I was thinking when Sarah talked about the cross-discipline and the need for kind of involving design and UX and user experiences and so on into the accessibility area, I was thinking about a webinar we had, or maybe in-person event we had some years ago in Brussels, where we discussed the need for certification of accessibility professionals and so on. And then someone that was not from the kind of accessibility bubble say, why are you talking about this like as accessibility? And that person had been listening to accessibility nerds talking for 3 hours about the need for knowledge and awareness and everything. It was more generic accessibility, but this person said, but that's what everyone should have. It's not, why do you put it as a specific niche calling it accessibility? That way you won't ever kind of reach the broader audience. So, and I think that is sometimes we need that kind of wake up call in the accessibility world, because we tend to kind of look down to our own feet a little bit and in our own little bubbles. So everyone is complaining about bubbles, but everyone is in their own bubble as well. So, so yeah, I can't read that one. FinTech. Yeah, that's, I think, with the validation and identification and so on, then all the financials technology gets into that part. Also, communication could be how we communicate with or about, and cognitive accessibility, of course. So neurodiverse skills, yes, we haven't used that term here because the setting of the study speaks about cognitive, but of course neurodiversity is one of the aspects we have been looking into here, and trying to really broaden the scope. So often when people talk about cognitive, it tends to be intellectual or disabilities, but really that one of our aims with the report will be to really broaden the scope and try to have the more holistic view on this as we can. So yeah, people are still doing this. It's nice with the word clouds, isn't it? So thank you for all your input here. We will look into them and use these word clouds in the next phases of the project. But let's move on to the next part, if I can find my way back to my PowerPoint. I think we do see some similarities and also some new ideas, but really many of the ideas for research needed is, I think, comes back or are interconnected in one way or another. So just to move back to what is happening in the study right now, the survey we have is open until the end of November, and as I mentioned earlier, the final report will be finished and hopefully published as well in the first quarter of 2022. And I wanted to clarify also, when we talk about stakeholder consultations, I didn't really mention all the stakeholders there, but that is, of course, we have been talking a lot about research now, because the research is the basis for standardization and the literature review and so on. But of course, in the stakeholder consultations, we have been talking to as many different user groups and individuals as possible, and also professionals and industry, public sector, private sector, NGOs, and so on. So very, very broad perspective on stakeholder consultation in this whole study. And we have also found many new friends, which is really rewarding and also very nice in these workshops and the surveys and interviews and so on. We've found people who are doing very, very interesting things and who have fantastic input that we didn't know from before. So this topic seems to be very, very hot, and many clever people interested in it. So I think it has a good potential to succeed in making things better. When the Commission has approved the final report, the results will be public, and it will then be published on the study website. And you can find it on the super long URL, which is cognitiveaccessibilitystudy.com. So cognitiveaccessibilitystudy.com. That's where this report will be published when it's ready. And if you would like to know more or have other questions, of course, you're always welcome to contact us, and you can reach us at cognition@funka.com. So we're always happy to discuss or get more input from you if you would like to add something after this workshop. So just to see if we have any more open questions, something we haven't answered already or responded to. We have a couple of questions here. So, for example, we have a question that is there any technical solution to facilitate cognitive accessibility similar to modern screen readers like NVDA or JAWS? Those allow each user to configure their settings, making it a bit more personal solution. So there are things similar to that, but it's a little bit difficult to compare exactly, but because a screen reader is usable for quite a broad range of visual impairments, not only medically blind, but also people with severe visual impairments and so on. And the different solutions out there for cognitive disabilities, there are many, and some of them cover more than one cognitive issue or challenge, but none of them are as widely spread as the screen readers are for visually impaired users. So, but I think that kind of combination of client-based assistive technology that makes it possible for me to say my preferences and really to support me is, of course, one way to go. And Christian is now, and Funka has also been involved in a really award-winning project called Easy Reading, where we have tried to do something similar to this, at least with a tool that makes it possible for users to pick and choose different assistive technology to overcome some of the barriers, at least. But if somebody could invent the perfect tool for this, then of course that would be very, very helpful. But right now there are many different tools on the market, and I think the most difficult part is to make sure that users find them and get to know them and understand how to use them. We have another question specifically from the study. Did you look at how guidelines could be done for cognitive accessibility? There's an example from gov.uk with some good visual guidelines a couple of years ago. And that is one of, we have looked at, I hope everything, but at least as much as we have been able to find, and definitely gov.uk is part of what we have been looking into. We also have a question, what level of cognitive accessibility should do to know what you are following WCAG? It's hard to know since the group is so heterogeneous. So I don't know if this is kind of the level of WCAG or not, but in the global standard WCAG, then the cognitive aspects of that is really mostly on the AAA level. And today, the US regulations are in the previous version of the standard, even so 2.0, and in the European legislation, the minimum requirements are on AA level. So if you want to use WCAG as a tool to provide more and better accessibility, cognitive accessibility, then of course the AAA requirements is a good start. But it's important to understand that the reason why these requirements are at AAA level is that they are deemed not to be possible to implement in all situations, in all circumstances, and in all kinds of websites and services. So that's kind of the definition of the AAA. So, but there are many good ideas and requirements in AAA, and they're also mentioned as informative in the EN 301549 standard. So that's one, if you want kind of to kickstart your accessibility, cognitive accessibility journey, then the AAA requirements are maybe the most kind of publicly available and easy to use requirements. So let's see if we have something more in the chat. No. So perfectly timed. This is when we're supposed to wrap up. So that's good. But that said, please do reach out if you have any more questions. We are always happy to talk to you. So what we have learned today, I think, is what have we learned today? That more research is needed. That is really a conclusion of today, and also, of course, that general solutions can't solve all problems. We need probably a combination of general and personalized, or society individual or society group individual level solutions. I think that is also something that has been very strongly pushed from the audience today, and also something we have taken into account before. Also awareness, and that there is a big gap both from the what professionals know about cognitive accessibility and how the recommendations and the research out there on user needs, how that is kind of implemented in real life, and how that is used, and also existing solutions and assistive technology and so on that doesn't really reach the users. So there are a complex matrix of different kinds and types and categories of issues that needs to be solved, and from a report writing perspective, that is good, because then we have a lot of proposals to write up on. On the other hand, it becomes rather complex to kind of sort this and prioritize in a good order. I don't know, Christian, if you have any closing words, something you would like to end with, or something we forgot or I forgot to have in the conclusions part here.
There are two issues which I found also very interesting beyond the ones you already mentioned. It was the transitions issue and the institutions issue. It might be different in all the countries, but I suspect that in all the countries, these two contexts are important to consider: transitions and institutions.
Yeah, I agree. And Sarah, do you have any conclusions or final?
I was a bit overwhelmed by the final word cloud. So there are so many different concepts now that I thought, oh God, this is a thread that I need to look more into. So thank you very much for all the additional info. Gaming is really one interesting area as well. And there are lots of different threads that we will have to look into a bit more. So this is what I take away immediately, and that there are lots of different research paths that are possible and that should be looked more into. Okay, so with that, I think we say thank you to everyone. We have
3 minutes left until we are supposed to end. So I will give you your 3 minutes back, which means that you will have time to recover or save the world or make a really cognitively accessible solution. If you can come up with that now, it's only 2 minutes left. But thank you very much for all your contributions today. We are always happy to talk to you. Please do reach out and stay tuned for the report when we finish with this, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.